I'm very, very excited about this next discussion as well that we're having. We've had two fantastic panels, and I think the third panel that we're about to have is going to be a very interesting one, in that it's going to cover an area that's not often sort of talked about, right? So I think one of the things that gets completely missed out when we speak of marketing, technology, etc., is the management or the leadership aspect of what needs to be done top down to make things happen and produce results. Because oftentimes the best intentions and the best technologies out there will come to naught if there isn't leadership will, management will to execute and produce. And that's really going to be the focus of our next conversation. I'm incredibly thrilled to introduce Deepak Sharma, President and Chief Digital Officer at Kotak Bank. Deepak heads Kotak's digital initiatives, where he drives digital transformation, business model innovation, and future-ready initiatives of the bank. He's responsible for efficiency, productivity, customer experience, and growth of the business through digital intervention across digital channels, including lending, payments, investments, insurance, trade, forex, etc. Deepak also leads digital IT and product engineering, innovation lab, design studio, fintech partnerships, and the startup ecosystem participation for the bank. Under his leadership, Kotak has launched several innovative and global first products such as 811, G5, Hashtag Banking, K-Mall, WhatsApp Banking, and K-Pay. Apart from new initiatives like API, Open and Connected Banking, Conversational Banking Bot, KEA, BYOD Biometric Banking, cross-border remittances on blockchain, AI, and robotic process automation. Deepak believes in constant innovation and focuses on building business models and platforms which are customer-centric, value accretive, and disruptive. Deepak has worked across various international markets and brings a global perspective to the business. In his previous role, he was responsible for setting the bank's highly successful non-resident Indian and international remittances business. Deepak also played a key role in launching the bank's affluent banking program, Privy League. With over 27 years of experience, Deepak's professional tenure spans banking, telco, and consumer services verticals. Prior to joining Kotak, he was part of the leadership team of consumer banking at Standard Chartered from 2003 to 2008. Thereafter, as national head for corporate business at Standard Chartered, he was responsible for building the corporate payroll and wealth management business. He has completed an advanced program in strategy from IIMGAL, as well as the Stanford LEAD certificate in corporate innovation. He is a member of the Airtel Customer Advisory Board, member of the Confederation of Indian Industry Digital Transformation Committee, FICCI, National Committee on FinTech, and a number of startup industry forums, in addition to participating in various state and government initiatives on the Digital India roadmap. He mentors FinTech and startup ecosystems on an ongoing basis as well. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm round of applause to Deepak as he joins us. Yeah, so Deepak, I think this, when I approached you for speaking at this event, I mean, the topic that I had in mind was one that is very, very close to me, in the sense that quite often conversations about technology, marketing, if you look at it, happen sort of in isolation without oftentimes considering the people aspect involved, that ultimately there are people executing it and there is a lot of leadership will, management will needed to make things happen. And that is something that probably doesn't get talked about often, number one. Secondly, I think if we really think about Martech, and that word is bandied about so much today, it's really an amalgamation of three things: marketing, technology, and management or leadership, right? And I think till 3 years back, you could afford for this to be siloed. Marketing that did its own thing. I guess tech guys did their own thing. Leadership sort of set the vision and did their own thing to siloed. But I think they have inextricably gotten linked, I would say, in the last few years, right? So marketers, for example, I think it's fair to say they've started adopting technology in a big way. Tech folks have started adopting design and growth hacking principles, right? And so really it's up to leadership / management to bring these together and ensure that, say, the sum is sort of greater than the parts. And that's one aspect that I really want to spend a lot of time with you. So first question to you is just talk about this convergence. I think you've seen over your rich experience, probably this convergence happening logically to a point where it is today, right? So why is this convergence important? How did it happen? And what should be our big takeaways from it, from a leadership standpoint?
So thanks, Subra, for inviting me over. I think in your question itself, you gave some of the answer which I was about to talk. Because organizations are realizing two things. One is a lot of initiatives or investments that organizations are making is failing to give a commensurate return. So that's a question mark, that when you keep investing across different aspects, be it a Martech stack or your data or CDP or real-time analytics, they are run by different functions of the organization. Each one has a vision of what they want to do. But then it's not adding up to the combined, the vision of the firm. And second is the revenue or a return that you expect from these investments. So I think organizations have learned through some of these to question that what is the end outcome? Why are we doing it? And no one team or business can answer this question in isolation. So I think that is forcing organizations to look at people, structure, and culture. And we'll talk about this, like you said, in the subsequent questions. The second is when you look outside, whom are incumbents up against? In every industry of financial service today, you find a big tech or someone who does not have a package of legacy coming in and reimagining and creating a very different attacker model. And the moment you look at that, you realize, hey, listen, something that we are doing is not right. And I think apart from internal ability, there is also an outside-in view that is coming in now. And I think both of these are driving the transition and the change within organizations.
It's a very, very interesting way of looking at it. I think oftentimes the fact that we speak of technology, but at the leadership level, it doesn't manifest into the results that you expect is probably driving this very important convergence, right? But as you do this, I think you're also one of the important aspects to take care of in the last few years. For anybody to successfully execute digital marketing technology together, is to really bring completely different functions together, right? So, for example, you have on the one hand the so-called coding nerd, if you will, the IT folks who are in their own world in terms of technology and what they do. On the other hand, you have the creative marketer, always looking for creative opportunities and more creative minded people. And so just being able to bring these together and make them work to this common goal which you spoke of, common processes, common outcomes, is important. So what has been some of your guidance or advice that you would give in terms of making this happen effectively and creating that org alignment which is super critical?
Yeah, so I think phase one, when we started, just like we typically look at in the CDP, you all start with getting a unified view of customer, outlining what are the key use cases, where do you want to apply. Say you want to reduce churn, or you want to increase the product holding ratios, or you want to build in a high level engagement. So there are key metrics, and those metrics are owned by different business owners or functional owners. So the starting point first is to understand from each area what are the key outcomes that they are trying to solve. As we look at those outcomes, I think then comes the data strategy. I always would put data is an enabler, data is not the lead. Okay, I think because in a lot of organizations, I think this mismatch always gets the data team running ahead and the business teams are following. And I think that's where we see some of these, the ownership and how do you monetize a lot of this information comes in. So then I think as we align the core business goals and the teams, then we stitch it with a data fabric. To say to do this, what do you need? What is the data strategy? I think getting the data strategy in then takes to the next level to say that now you have got these two. What are the Martech stack that you want to integrate, as long as they are open and they are not binding you with one particular provider? Because then the openness and interoperability, because the teams that are running, they want freedom. They don't want to get locked in. And you also need to tell them that just because you're working together doesn't mean that you don't have ability to experiment, think, and build stuff, right? So I think this combination helps people work together in team. The data stack team knows what data do they require. And again, bringing in what I call internally the CRR, which is not the cash reserve ratios, but how do we bring in the context, how do we bring the relevance, and how do we bring it real time? So I think as long as these metrics are met, then it comes on back to the business teams to see that how do they use this using Martech tools, the data that is available, and convert it into business outcomes.
Fantastic. So I think just to summarize, start with the business outcome first. I think that's probably the first point that you're mentioning. Then work your way down to data strategy that helps you achieve those business outcomes. Pick tools that ensure that you're able to execute on the data strategy, and that's a crucial point, and probably where a CDP also has a role to play, is the interoperability of the systems, and then look at the CRR aspect as you sort of execute on and sort of action it, right? So now, if you really look at this, I think the third thing to really understand here would be a lot of these tools today, as you implement them, it's not just about aligning internal organization, but eventually this Martech is sold by partners, sold by vendors, and so there is a people/leadership element of involved in partner management as well. So what is it? And I think we just met a few days back, and you also had a few comments in that area. So would love to hear in this sort of framework, what do you expect from a partner? What sort of helps you choose the right partner, and do you have any guidance for people here?
No, I don't think there's anything like a right or a wrong partner, because we are all learning as we go along. But I think the challenge only is no one partner provides you everything. And I think that's important. And that's why I said the stack needs to be modular. When we look at tools, it needs to be easy to plug in. And we should always have room to change, replace, upgrade, depending on how trends around us are changing. But I think what's happening now is even within CDP, there are multiple layers, right? So not stage one, we want a unified view of all the customer data. So whether they are customer or non-customer, that itself probably is a core of some firms, but not necessarily their ability to present the data in a format which you can consume, or building the analytics engine on top of it, or how do we take on to the reporting part of it or activation part of it. So as long as we see that a fabric can be stitched together, I think that I would call it as my number one priority, because I internally keep telling team that while a partner is good for today, you don't know how things will change. And I think our stack should be such where, sorry to be saying it in your event, but we should not get locked in with a partner. And I think we like to keep that flexibility and freedom with the organization to see how to maneuver over.
Absolutely. I think, in fact, I would actually argue that this is the right forum to say it, because ultimately being locked into a vendor is the worst thing that can happen. And I've seen that happen to a few organizations and how they struggle to get out of it, right? So the other thing is, as you implement technologies, and especially complex technologies, innovative technologies which have not been used before, use cases that have not been tried before. And in fact, in the earlier panels as well, for example, Vivek was saying, and I think Sandeep was mentioning as well, that there have been many misses. In fact, misses have been more than hits, right? So which means that at the leadership level, probably there has to be higher tolerance for failure, and conversely, there has to be an encouragement for risk taking and experimentation, right? And I think we all know that, at least in these large organizations, that there is a lot of conservative approach, that people are afraid of failure. What are some sort of inputs that you give to sort of cut through this and sort of develop that culture of experimentation, which is crucial for success?
No, I think you're right, because when we do this, before we perfect, there will be mishaps that will happen on the way, and it's given. I always keep saying that it's a great actor or a great player knows what lines they forgot or what stroke they didn't play well. because audience need to be smarter than those actors or the players to figure out what they missed. Even in organization, the practitioners understand it better as to what they miss than necessarily people who are overseeing this. So a lot of times these things may even get unnoticed. Okay, that's point number one. Not everything that you miss gets noticed. But I think that's on the lighter side. The other one in financial service, the risk is twofold. And I again describe it as there are one-way decisions versus there are two-way. You miss something and you correct, which does not cost a fortune to the firm or regulatory censor, is okay. Move on. I mean, and keep doing it, keep experimenting it. Maybe some targeted communication, some offer, some personalization didn't work. You know real time what's not working. I mean, you're not really setting your house on fire. So that's absolutely fine. And the more we do, the faster we do, the more mistakes we make, better it is for us. So I would rather encourage mistakes in those areas because that's a part of the learning process. I think where the expenses can, or these experiments can be very expensive, are when especially we are looking at the credit, we are looking at fraud, risk, security, authentication, where it's about real money. Because a lot of times, for example, we run a program to qualify certain customers on a targeted buy now, pay later offer. And the whole base premise of the data itself on which we were building these models is flawed and we haven't tested enough. And then we roll out to a large number. I think some of those rollback can be frightfully expensive or risky, or probably we end up blocking certain transactions or access. So I always keep reminding ourselves that we are a regulated entity with a high level of risk management function. Our experiments cannot go against that, but yes, I think within that, again, if you want to experiment, experiment small, with a very, very small targeted base, where we can take that risk. And there again, there is no standard formula because each organization has a very different risk tolerance limit. So I won't even say that how this should work, because in the context of the organization, one should be clear as to how much is the permissible risk that you can take while experimenting.
And so this incremental approach, I'm assuming, because I think we read out this very exhaustive and very powerful bio and in terms of your career, and I'm sure you've done this so many times now, right? And I think the earlier panel also spoke of start small, go big, etc., right? But oftentimes it's easier said than done in the sense that, for example, you might not get, especially in this one-way sort of decisions that you're saying, that you might not get the results you want, or the results may not warrant a scale. However, if you scale, you might get different results. So this interpretation of the outcome and this iteration, please talk us through that a little bit. Like anything that you want to highlight in terms of not giving up or when you should give up, that would be fantastic to understand as well.
So I think one of the risks we have in these experimentation is risk of false positives. Yeah, I think that's a bigger one. But as I said, again, in some areas, false positives does not really hurt the reputation of the firm. It may still create customer dissonance. I'm not denying it. Customer dissonance is a very important matrix too. But then it's not leading to a financial or a regulatory risk, right? So, for example, when we do certain personalization, telling customers that, this is the card that you need to upgrade, knowing, say, because we launched a series of IPL team cards, right? So there are some 6 teams for which we have cards of their players, and then we do know affinity scores of a lot of customers, and a lot of them, since they come through 811 route, largely they are millennials below 30. Sports fanatic. We see that they play on Dream 11, and so there is data, because when you're playing on Dream 11, you are paying through a banking app or a UPI or whatever you do. So as we start building affinity scores, we know what are you doing, and thereby, while we will not encourage you to play Dream 11, but we'll definitely use this data to recommend what card should you be looking at as your next card. I may go wrong. I mean, basis that I may think you are a Chennai fan, while you might be a Mumbai for all you know. And if I show you a wrong card, maybe you'll not like it, but that's okay. You're not going to take a call. But just come to think of it now, if I'm using the similar learning model to create a persona of yours and show you a limit on a credit card of say 2 lakhs, while you know that you get a limit of 10 lakhs elsewhere, it's going to piss you off. Because you will say this organization doesn't even understand what my net worth is and thereby they are giving me this limit. So while a debit card with a co-branded is okay to experiment, but a credit limit on a credit card is not. So both are plastics. But the underlying decision that we are taking on basis that we run our campaign or personalization, that becomes extremely important for us. So customers with even higher propensity to take, say, a credit card may not click or go ahead just because they found the credit limit was something that was upsetting them. And a lot of times we wonder that why a certain campaign of mine targeted at a good set of customers with propensity, they're failing to make cut. And then you start realizing, and it's just not credit card, it's just one example. It can be on personal loan, it can be on consumer finance, it can be on any product where you have a risk underwriting matrix. And then you realize it's not about our ability to mine that customer well, but it's our ability to use that credit risk model right. And I think that at times when we run some of this, our underlying assumption decides whether we succeed or fail, rather than how do we stitch the rest of the stuff together.
Got it. A couple of last points from you. One is, we spoke of, do you have any best practices that you want to share in terms of org structure that you believe is more conducive to digital transformation? Like, for example, how do you, again, going back to the question of combining different functions with different outcomes, what are some organizational best practices that you would want to call out for marketing leaders here?
So I think the way we have been experimenting and we have seen success is largely to orchestrate teams around platforms. And what I call is the platform operating model. Platform operating model typically brings in the business teams, tech teams, design folks, consumer insight practice, and the data practice. So these are the 5 key pillars on which we bring these teams, because each one has value to add. But in a typical organization structure, business team will expect something, somebody will convert it into a business requirement document, they look for a vendor, IT team will go and develop, and then by the time market would have moved, and then the business team says, oh no, this is something I wanted 3 months back, and now the market is somewhere else. So by aligning these functions, we realize they have 360 view of the problem or opportunity that we are chasing. Second, we still are able to bring in all the relevant skill sets that are required for us to come together. And third, they own the success or failure of that particular project. So one cannot say, I did my bit, but we failed. Either we fail or we succeed together. I think as people get aligned to these outcomes, we are seeing increasingly most of our large initiatives run in a matrix structure. And they are aligned to those teams, and thereby we are able to cross-pollinate a lot of new ideas, experimentation, at the same time drive the strategic ones.
Fantastic. And the last question, which is, I think you've been at the forefront of innovation for decades now, and you've seen a lot of this evolution happen. What next? Like, if you look at the next few years, what are some things that you believe are going to come to fruition that you're personally excited about? What are others that you believe would sound more like a fad and may not take off? We may be right, wrong, but your perspectives there would be very, very valuable to understand.
I wish I knew really what will take off. I think it's only my guess. I think we are seeing organizations morph more and more into consumer tech firms, right? So that's given, because if we are not tech firms, irrespective of whatever business we are in, I don't see there will be a future. But when I say tech, I think we also increasingly know it's data, which is embedded as a part of tech. But I think when we talk of consumer tech firms, very often we speak largely on tech. I think where we miss the ball is the consumer. Because how well do we understand the consumer decides the success or failure of the organization. because the consumer preferences or habits are changing so rapidly. Consumers are so whimsical, loyalty is out of the window, customers need choice, they need to be spoiled. I mean, many things. Okay, and I think that is more of a behavioral psychology and behavioral economist job, which a lot of organizations are poor at. So I'm seeing the way the future of the firms, those who succeed irrespective of whatever business they are in, is to bring in a very, very sharp consumer-led practice while everybody is scaling up the tech and data. And I think if we are able to stitch that, we'll be able to monetize a lot of tech and data investments. And in the process, there will be few winners, but not everyone will swim and reach across the shore, that I'm sure.
Fantastic. I think this is a super, super insightful session. I think lots to take away from here. So Deepak, thank you so much for taking time out and joining us today. Appreciate it. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Deepak and Subra, for yet another insightful session. This brings us to the end of all the panel discussions. May I now request Subra to give the closing comments and comments?
I will keep it brief, but I think the three panels that happened today, hopefully all of you were able to stitch the sessions together. The first session was all about just the importance of data, and the rise of the super intelligent marketer essentially meant how do you start understanding the data that's coming your way, what kinds of data do you have, and sort of start what frameworks can you use to organize it. And I thought there were some very interesting points that that Somesh, Vivek and Jain brought up. The second was all about, okay, now that you've understood all of this framework, how do you practically put it to use? What kind of hits, misses are you seeing? And we saw a bunch of fantastic best practices that we heard from Sandeep, Gagan and Vadi. And I think Deepak's session was really meant to round it all off. And I really thought that there were so many important insights from his session as well, which is the leadership aspect. How do you execute? How to do all of this in a meaningful way? So I hope all of you found these three sessions useful. We will keep doing these kind of conferences more and more. Hopefully the next wave is not going to stop us, and we'll have more in-person events like this. But I think we are where we are today. So as we close the event, once again, thank you for your participation.